Hey guys, welcome back. So I got a message on Instagram a few weeks ago asking what materials I like to keep on hand. And I was putting some stuff away today and I figured I should probably make a video about this. Maybe it'll be interesting to people. This video might get long-winded because I'm going to try to explain a little bit about each of these materials, and there's kind of a lot of stuff here. So bear with me. If you're interested, stick around. If not, just pass on by. If I get the wherewithal, I'll try to maybe put some links to the different times where I start to talk about different materials. I don't know, but just a forewarning, it's probably going to take a little bit. So let's see where to start. Let's start with what's not on this cabinet first, but there are important things that I think that if you're building things, and especially making molds and then making castings, like a very good place to start is with polyester resin, fiberglass, either matte or cloth, and some a body filler like Bondo. Polyester resin is basically what you would use with fiberglass matte or cloth to make a fiberglass part. So if you see anything made of fiberglass, it's the matte and or cloth infused with the polyester resin, which hardens, and you get a solid part. The reason I keep that outside is because the polyester stuff tends to have a lot of odor that I don't find very pleasant, and I don't want to breathe it while I'm in my little room that doesn't have a ton of ventilation. So that stuff stays outside. Very good to have. Now, you know, if you're watching this video because you're trying to get into this, and you need to know probably like the first things you would want to buy. Those two things are really, really good first steps. Now, as a note, I am trying to work my way away from polyester resins more toward epoxies, but polyester resins are still pretty normal part of my workflow, so I keep those on hand. Another thing you're going to need is a silicone of some sort, which back here I keep on hand two different types of silicone that I just keep here. Some projects might require something a little different, and I will buy different silicones if a project really needs it, but just to have on hand in my small little shelf space, I find that the 30 durometer silicones, and the durometer is the hardness, so like this silicone, it's got a really good amount of flex. It's soft enough that I can capture pretty detailed parts, but it's hard enough that if I make a bigger mold, it'll keep its shape, and I like that. Again, there's probably better silicones for specific things, but this is like just the right amount of middle ground that I can mold just about anything with either one of those silicones without too much problem. Now, if you're going to start out making parts, like if you want to make helmets or, you know, armor pieces or something, those materials are really, really good places to start. You don't need all this other stuff. However, this helps. Get into it in a moment. As far as the silicones go, the Mold Max 30 is a 10 cure silicone. It's less, I guess what I should say is the thing that's good about the 10 cure silicone is it's less sensitive to things like latex. So if you're trying to mold something that's been painted by somebody, you don't know what they used on it or what materials are on it, the 10 cure is a good bet because it's not going to be inhibited by things like mainly latex and sulfur based items. It's will make platinum cure silicones not cure. So 10 cure silicone is great for that. However, 10 cure silicones take longer to set generally. They usually require vacuum degassing, which I don't have a degassing chamber here, but there are tricks to get around that seem to work fine. I've used it plenty of times without it and it's been okay. But you should degas it. And the shelf life isn't as long. However, I have things here like this mold of this knee piston that is made with that Mold Max. I made this probably 5 years ago. I have a video of making this. I will link at the end of this. And this mold's been used probably over 100 times and it's held up totally fine. And so I don't know what, you know, the typical shelf life of this stuff is, but they say that platinum cure lasts longer archival life and less shrinkage over time. So the Mold Star 30, which is the other silicone that I use, which is this blue stuff, this silicone, it cures in 6 hours. Same basic hardness and overall, you know, mold properties as far as like how it holds up, the flexibility, etc. are about the same. However, this is a platinum cure silicone, so I like this because it cures faster. It cures in 6 hours, so I don't have to wait till the next day to start the second part of my mold. I can just start it in the morning, and then by like 2 in the afternoon, I can, you know, pour the other half of the mold, and then by the evening, I can start making parts. So that's really nice. Also, you don't need to degas this silicone because it is a lower viscosity. And according to the data sheets, this, like I said, has less shrink and a longer archival life than tin cure silicone. So that's good. It's a little bit more expensive, but not too much, like really not that much at all. So I have been using that quite a bit. So there's your silicones. That's like what I have on hand right now and what I typically buy. When I run out, I'll buy more of that. There are silicones by other companies that are awesome. Silpac, BJB. Let's see. There's multiple other companies that make great materials, better in some circumstances than some of this stuff, or at least equal. You know, worth looking into. Let's see what is next. Let's see. On the shelf here, I have Foam It 3, which is an expanding foam. Now this is really good if you want to make a part that's like semi-solid, you know, or make something quick so you can kind of get a look at it, like this life cast here. This is made out of that foam. A kit of that foam goes a really, really long way. I mean, this whole head is only like 2 little cups of that stuff, so it goes a very, very long way. It's great for reinforcing stuff, like you put a resin shell on the outside and backfill it with foam, so you kind of semi-solid object with a nice paintable surface. Works great for a lot of purposes. Once I started using it, I've found so many places to use it. Then up on this shelf, I have some resins here. Let's see, I have 65D and Smoothcast 300. Smoothcast 65D and Smoothcast 300. The Smoothcast 65D is typically what people use to do rotocast parts, and the Smoothcast 300 is what a lot of people use to cast like little greablies and, you know, small things like this, little like 3PO bits. I don't know where my camera is. There it is. Let me see if it'll focus. But little stuff, detailed. Now both of these can be used in place of each other. I used to only use the Smoothcast 300 for most things, just because, like I said, it'd be the one thing that I'd buy. I didn't want to buy a whole kit of a different type of resin just to make one little thing, so I would just buy one type of resin. The 300 is not quite as good for rotocasting, but it works fine. My 3PO's face that I've been using for years is made out of Smoothcast 300 rotocast. And vice versa, the Smoothcast 65D, the rotocasting resin, can be used to make little parts as well. I use the 65D to make these R2-D2 pieces, and it works fine, just not quite as low viscosity, but they're interchangeable to some extent. Another couple resins I like to have on hand are Smoothcast 305, which is almost the same as the 300. It basically cures the same, looks the same once it's dry. The properties are the same, but it cures a little bit more slowly. So if you have a complicated mold that you need to like fiddle with, sometimes you have a mold that has like weird air bubbles or weird pockets where you have to pour it half full and then tip it and then fidget around to get all the air out. If you have a mold like that that's a little more high maintenance, the Smoothcast 305 is a little easier to work with because it gives you a little more time before it kicks off. The 300 goes off in just a few minutes. It's cured, and that's it. And next to those resins, another resin is Smoothcast 325. It's a clear resin. You can tint it real easy. It's really similar again to the 300 as far as the properties, just subtle little differences. But again, the 65D and 300 I pretty much always have on hand now. Then we have Freeform Air, which are in those 2 buckets right here. These are an epoxy putty. Super handy for all kinds of stuff, for reinforcing parts, or, you know, if you're doing a fiberglass layup or an epoxy layup and you have a weird pocket, you can fill that in with some the Freeform and then glass over the back, and it helps fill in the area, keeps it strong, but it's also very light. They make different types of Freeform. They have some that's for sculpting and some for like making habitats, all kinds of stuff. It's a 2-part epoxy. You mix it, you can sculpt it, it's great. Real simple. But the Freeform Air I have been keeping on hand for about 1.5 years now, and I use it a lot. Then, let's see, next to this I have Vitaflex 40, which is a urethane rubber. It looks like this, like the 3PO feet that I have here. It's a little bit soft for this kind of application, but you can see it's like a really strong, flexible, stretchy rubber that you can rotocast. If you ever see Reeves FX, he does like the Batman cowls and all that. He uses that resin a lot to make a lot of those kind of things. I initially bought that to do the RoboCop helmet I did for the chin strap and the underhead part that's supposed to be flexible. That's what I used. It worked awesome. I haven't used that a lot, so there's probably like half that kit left still, but it can be very handy if you're making flexible items. There are some other flexible urethanes that are, again, different durometers. Back to the durometer thing with the silicone, Vitaflex 40 durometer, so you can compare it to a 40 durometer silicone. It's about the same hardness. But for 3PO's hands and feet, I'll be getting another similar resin for that soon that I'll probably show here. Next, we're going to get into the epoxies. So for like these molds here, like this one here that I did, it's a big matrix mold. It's all epoxy. I used epoxy coat gray for my base coat, which is kind of like a gel coat. It's just you put on a couple layers of that. This one's gray. They make it in red also. That hardens. It's really, really strong. And then you use the epoxamite, which is kind of the equivalent of polyester resin as far as usages. It's clear. You can put it in fiberglass cloth, and it's really, really strong. So I would use that as a reinforcement. That's what I'm trying to move away from the polyester stuff and move over to all epoxy, because it's just so much easier to work with, lasts way longer, it's lighter, it doesn't get brittle over time, supposedly, but that's all, those are all pluses in my book. So I'm going to start using all epoxy-based stuff soon, as much as possible. Then let's see what else is on my crazy shelf here. I keep the whole top here is fillers. So I've got Urafil 11, which is like these fine little fibers. You can mix it in with resin. It works great with the Smooth Cast 305 for making little mother molds like this. So you can mix it in with your Smooth Cast 305 and brush it over your silicone brush up mold. And it's really, really strong. And it just kind of makes like a nice little putty that you can basically great for making mother molds. It's also good filler for backfilling, you know, kind of like the same stuff I was talking about with the freeform air, where if you need to backfill like a little cavity or something to help fill it in, that stuff works great because you can make like a paste out of your regular casting resin and just smear it in where you need it to go. Works well. Urafil 7 is another filler. It's more like powder. That stuff is really good for rotocasting. If you need to use like a lower viscosity resin for your rotocast, you can put some of that Urafil 7 in there, and it'll slow down the material as you rotocast it, so it doesn't just slosh all around. It helps it stick to the surface. It's great. It's handy for those kind of things. Just a little cup in your first batch, and you're good. And I'll get into all these more specifically later if people ask. Let's see. I have micro balloons, which is very similar to Cabasil, and Cabasil is something I keep on hand pretty regularly. This stuff is very, very fine little powder that you put into fiberglass to make like a mud. It's supposed to be not as bad for you as Cabasil. Now, Cabasil is a filler like this. It's like extremely fine. Apparently, it's glass beads, and they become airborne very, very easily, and you can breathe them in, and they're extremely bad for you. This stuff is supposed to be less bad. It looks and feels almost exactly the same, so I really don't know. That stuff is fun. I also move this stuff over here, get this out of the way. Fiberglass chop mat, which is by Composite Resources, I think. Is this it? Yeah, Composite Resources. And what that is a like chopped up fiberglass strand. You can use this as like a filler, so you mix up your polyester resin or your epoxy resin and you mix this together, pour some of this in there, and it's not really like a putty, but it works like a putty, but it's all little fiberglass strands, so it's strong and makes good filler. So this stuff is really, really handy. There we go. And then, what is next? I've got dust masks, just random stuff. 3D printer filament, also random. I keep some metal powders in here. These are, if you want to do cold casts, where you can either mix this with your resin or coat your mold with these metal powders. So this is real bronze, this is real aluminum. And when you coat the mold with this stuff and then you put your resin in, you can brush it with steel wool, and it will actually polish like real metal. It looks, you basically have a real metal surface on your items, and this is really cool stuff. So keep some metal powders and put these back. And then some mold releases. Ease Release 200 I use quite a bit. This is, you know, basically I spray this in for silicone molds, and if you're making a two-part mold, you need to make sure that you release the two halves so they don't stick together. So I keep some of that. I keep sonite wax and a brush dedicated to my sonite wax. This is just another mold release. This is good for like if you're making a mold like this, where you have two halves that have to connect together and you don't want the resin to stick. When you make your first half, you brush some sonite wax in between, and when you make the second half, they won't stick together. It's very, very handy. On the bottom, way down there, I don't know if you guys can see it, right down there is a bag at the very bottom. That is UltraCal 30 for making like stone molds, like this guy, which is my alien mask. Another thing that I'm out of right now that I usually keep on that shelf is latex. So if I'm making like a latex mask like this, I usually have a big jug of latex down there, but I am out of that right now. Need to get more. Then, let's see. I have different glues and tints. There's some tints for resin that I use that are called So Strong. They look like this. So Strong liquid. This one is yellow, but I have a bunch of different colors. This way I can just tint the resin. It really doesn't change any of the properties of resin, just makes it a different color. Some different glues. I have some adhesives for silicone, barge, Zap-A-Gap, a few other things like that. I also have the XTC 3D 3D printer epoxy. Now, that stuff is okay. It actually is good, but the epoxamite that I started using up here is almost the same stuff, and it's cheaper to buy a big thing of epoxamite than a similar amount of the XTC 3D. So I'm just going to use epoxamite from now on. And then there's like 3D printer stuff if you guys are interested in that. I just have some resins for the Form 2 and then some filament for the other printer. And that's kind of like the basic stuff that I have on hand. You don't need all that stuff if you're just making some projects, but this is what I have. There are other things I would like to add to this, some different silicone grades, a few different types of resins that I think would be handy to have for different projects. But overall, this is more than enough to get me through like any of the projects that I have. If someone says, hey, can you make this? And I have till tomorrow and don't have time to go, you know, pick up anything. This will get me through a project, almost guaranteed. So anyway, I'm sorry that was long and pretty rambly, but it's, I don't know another way to go through all this stuff. So hopefully you found that interesting. If not, I am sorry. If you got more specific questions about any of this stuff, let me know, and I will try to cover it. I know it's a lot to explain in one shot. I could make a video about each one of the projects, each one of the products almost by itself. So I apologize for the ramble. I apologize for saying too many times. I know I did because I could tell, and it's awful. I hate when I feel like that. But anyway, I'll be back soon. I'm going to get back to work here, and I will see you guys in a bit later.